Ready when you are, Chair Anderson.
Okay, well, at this time, I do want to welcome everybody to our Innovate 680 teleconference meeting that we are having tonight. And so if you would like to go ahead, please give your attention to this short video that Terry Ann is going to broadcast for us.
Due to COVID-19, this meeting will be conducted as a Zoom meeting pursuant to the provisions of Assembly Bill 361, which suspends certain requirements of the Brown Act. This meeting is being live streamed on the CCTA website. The chair will call upon members, staff, and other speakers by name. Please speak clearly and state your name before giving comments or remarks. Persons participating via Zoom with their cameras enabled are reminded that their activities are visible to viewers. Members participating by Zoom wishing to speak should physically raise their hand and unmute their mic when called upon. Members should mute their mics when done speaking. Citizens participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the Raise Hand feature or dial *9 if participating via phone, and the chair or staff will call upon them at the appropriate time. Citizens will have 3 minutes to speak. After 3 minutes, staff will lower their hand and mute their mic. Participants via phone will be called upon by the last 4 digits of their phone number. It is requested that public speakers state their names and organization, but providing such information is voluntary. Written public comments received in accordance with the teleconferencing special notice for public comment guidelines are printed on the meeting agenda. If authors of the written correspondence would like to speak, they should raise their hand and the chair will call upon them at the appropriate time. All written correspondence received after that and during the meeting will be entered into the record. A roll call vote will be taken for all action items. Thank you for participating in a meeting of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority.
Okay, thank you so much. Now, Terry Ann, would you mind conducting a roll? Excuse me, I have the hiccups. As you all know, I don't drink, so it's something I ate. So don't mind me with the hiccups in the middle of our meeting. So do you mind conducting roll call for us as to who is here at this point? I'm going to get rid of them during roll call, I promise.
Thank you. Member Allen? Thank you. I see her.
Here.
Member Haskew?
Here.
Member Hernandez?
Present.
Member Mitchoff?
Yeah, I'm here.
Member Obringer?
I'm here.
Member Perkins?
Here.
Member Ross?
Present.
Member Stepper?
Here, but I can't see myself anymore.
Yeah, I saw you earlier. Now your screen's black. Member Storer? That's it. Vice Chair Noah?
Here.
Chair Anderson?
She wanted to get rid of her hiccups.
I'm here. I was getting rid of the hiccups. I muted myself, but I'm here.
All right, we have everyone present except for Member Storer and Member Stepper. We can now see you.
You can see me now, can't you?
Yes.
Yeah, you look fabulous. Okay, so now we're going to move right into public comment. This is the opportunity for anyone in the public to speak about anything that is not on this evening's agenda, but under the purview of our committee. And did we receive any written comment from anybody ahead of time, Terry Ann?
We have not received any written public comment.
Okay, and is there anyone present this evening who wishes to speak to any item not on tonight's agenda? And I am not seeing any virtual hands, and I'm not seeing any live hands either. This is sort of a first for some of us who have certain people who show up at all of our meetings. So apparently she hasn't discovered this meeting yet. So anyway, no public comment at this point, and now we will move right on to our consent calendar. We only have one item, and that is our consent calendar approving our minutes from the April 13th, 2022 meeting. Anyone have any changes, comments from committee members? Not seeing any. Any written public comments on this, Terry Ann?
No written public comment.
Okay, and is there anyone from the public who is present this evening who wishes to speak about our minutes? I am not seeing any, so do I have a motion to approve our minutes? Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Could we please have a roll call of this vote?
Yes, I think I know the voices, but I just want to confirm, was it Haskew, seconded by Stepper?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, Member Allen,
Yes.
thank you. Member Hoskew,
Yes.
Member Hernandez,
Yes.
Member Mitchell,
She's muted,
oh,
but
you're on mute. Member Mitchell. Welcome back. Member Obringer,
I'm going to abstain as I didn't participate in that meeting.
Member Perkins,
Yes.
Member Ross,
Yes.
okay. Member Stepper,
Yes.
Vice Chair Nowak,
Yes.
Chair Anderson.
yes.
Okay, back to Member Mitchell.
I know she's helping care for her elderly mother. She may be distracted with that for a moment. So, Karen, can you hear us?
Yes.
No, not you, the other Karen Mitchoff. Okay, well, anyway, we'll just mark her as not voting on that item, and we'll move right on to our next agenda item. And this is where we're going to have Stephanie launch right in and talk to us a little bit more, a brief update on what is happening with our update of Innovate 680 and the project, sort of an update of where we've been, where we're going, and some of the benchmarks we've already reached. So Stephanie, please go ahead.
Thanks, Chair Anderson. And can you please confirm you can see the slides?
We can see the slides. We're not looking at your favorite TV shows or emails or anything else. We're looking at the slides.
Thank you. Yes, this item is to provide you an update on the program and its projects, and just to let you guys know what's happened since we last met at our PAC meeting a few months ago. So this slide should look very familiar to you all at this point, but to refresh our memories, the Innovate 680 program is a performance-based program that looking at the corridor in a comprehensive way and to meet the following goals: improve safety, connectivity, efficiency, reliability of our corridor while we prepare it for the future, and also providing accessible mobility options to encourage mode shift and improve air quality along I-680. These are our 6 projects, and I will provide a quick update for each of them. So the Express Lane completion project, as you know, we're proposing to close the existing northbound gap between Walnut Creek and Benicia Martinez Bridge. The project is in the environmental clearance phase, and we're currently working on a VMT mitigation strategy and proposal as a result, or to be compliant with the SB 743 implementation from Caltrans. We're scheduled to meet with Caltrans headquarters later this month to present our VMT mitigation proposal. The team is also working on traffic operation analysis and also on design standard decision document. That's a document to Caltrans. The part-time transit lane project, it has identified a first phase to be northbound 680 between Bollinger Canyon Road and Ignacio Valley Road. The project team recently submitted a draft project initiation document. That's a planning scoping document that Caltrans requires. And the team is currently addressing comments from Caltrans, and they plan to submit the final version in August and hope to complete this PID, what we call PID phase, by end of summer. The Share Mobility Hubs project is looking at the eight mobility hub sites along the corridor as part of the current effort for a feasibility study. We have completed a site background and identification report, kind of detailing what's going on at each site, what's the existing condition and opportunities. And then also the team has actually met with each local jurisdiction and staff, that's the technical staff in each jurisdiction, as well as agency partners like BART to kind of go over our concepts and gather input. And this feasibility study is to be complete by the fall time. The Automated Driving System, or ADS project, is the pilot program that has 3 Share Autonomous Vehicle, or SAV, demonstration projects. The project team continues to collaborate with UC Berkeley, Verizon, and Nissan on use cases. Staff is working on contract negotiation with the new SAV vendor, as well as coordinating with County Connection on a master agreement and scope of work. The Mobility as a Service, or MOS, that team is continuing to develop the MOS app, the mobile app. The current work includes resolving issues with the trip planner platform, integration between various elements like car share, ride share, and connection protection. And then the software and app development work, it's ongoing. And then lastly, the Advanced Technology Project. Currently, the Coordinated Adaptive RAM Metering, or CARM, is it's ongoing. It's the first segment that we have identified is northbound 680 between Olympic Boulevard and Al Costa. The team has been working on a consensus memo to go over the process of which the CARM project can integrate with the Caltrans shop ramp metering project. And the CARM team has completed preliminary geometric drawings and design drawings and have submitted that to Caltrans. And we continue to coordinate with the Caltrans ramp metering team. And then lastly, under the Advanced Technology Project umbrella, we have recently kicked off a coordinated adaptive traffic signals as part of Innovate 680, and we're currently collecting data from our local jurisdictions. So here are a couple of funding opportunities that we have pursued so far this year. The first one is for the 680 express bus, and I'm happy to report that we found out last week that we were successful in getting partial funding from the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program, or TIRCIP. We'll be getting about 14.5 million from the TIRCIP funding, and separately about 21.5 million from the state's zero emission funding resources. And then together, this pot of fund, or this funding award, will help us procure 6 hydrogen zero emission fleet and fueling and maintenance infrastructure at County Connection and LAFTA, a shared mobility hub at Bollinger Canyon Park and Ride, and then also part-time transit lane training and testing at Momentum Station. And CCTA, LAFTA, and County Connection collaborated on this application, but when we will continue to collaborate and work on this project, various components of the 680 Express Bus program together moving forward. The second grant that we worked on was the National Infrastructure Project Assistance, or what we call MEGA grant, and that is under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. We submitted an application in May, and that had included a request for each of the Innovate 680 projects, as well as key projects in the 680 corridor listed here on the slide. And the funding request was about $395 million. And we hope to hear about the result of that grant later this year. And with that, it concludes my project updates for tonight. I'm happy to take any questions, and I'll take down the slide so we can see each other.
Okay, so does anyone have any questions for Stephanie at this time?
Yes. When do we expect to hear on the $395 million? When is that likely to be announced? Results?
Staff has heard from our lobbyists that it is a new program on the federal side, so there is not a timeline unless, Tim, you've heard otherwise, but the direction or the feedback was it is such if it's the first time program, it will take them some time to score and get through the logistics of it all. So we don't have a timeline.
Multi-months.
Multi-month, hopefully by fall, Tim. I'm hopeful.
I was just going to mention, I think based on the feedback that we've heard from the Hill, we're anticipating to hear back about usually about September, October, before November, for many reasons.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions or comments by this committee? If not, I'd be very happy to open it up to, oh, I'm sorry, Carlin, you're right there. I didn't see your hand up. Please go ahead.
No worries. I was just curious. You mentioned that the starting point had been determined for the CARM, or the CARM. And so I was just wondering if you could share with us, why that was the best place to start that program.
I think through the team's traffic analysis, they just found that segment to be the most beneficial for it to be a first segment. The team has identified the subsequent segment to follow. So it would be on the southbound side, the same stretch, and then subsequently the north part. I think Darren is on. He's a project manager on the consultant side. I don't know if you want to get into the technical details, but it was shown that first segment, San Ramon to Walnut Creek northbound, would be the most logical segment to implement CARM as the first segment.
Yeah, that's correct, Stephanie. And also that combined with the relatively lowest cost and ease of implementation, just because of the design of the existing ramps. the cost of implementing that was also lowest. So the cost benefit was the best for that particular corridor.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or follow-ups to Carlin? Does anyone who is here in the rest of the panel that's with us, anyone else have questions? I'm not seeing any virtual hands. And if you want to just shout out in case I don't see you, that would be fine. Not seen any. And then just to make sure, Terry, did we have any written comments from anybody along this?
No written public comments have been received.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for that. And now we're going to move on to our next item, is also informational, and Danielle Stanislaus and Josh Scheidler are going to provide us some interesting, fun information about what's happening in Houston, how that relates to our Innovate 680 program, concept of operations, and implementation plan development. So I'm going to just turn it right over to Danielle to go ahead and introduce Josh to us and explain a little bit more about what we're presenting this evening.
Thanks so much, Chair Anderson. Stephanie, if you want to put the slide deck back up for us, that'd be wonderful. So most of you know, I serve in a dual capacity. I'm Danielle Stanislaus with Emergent Transportation Concepts, a part of the consultant team supporting the Innovate 680 program. And I serve as both your stakeholder engagement manager, but also as a part of the systems management team. And you've heard from Liz Justison from WSP, who's the lead for the systems team, and myself talk to you guys at a couple of meetings this year about how important O&M and some of the big policy and technical issues surrounding O&M that we're tackling when we talk about implementing the Innovate 680 program. So today we're going to spend a little bit of time setting some context, giving you a little bit more information on some recent conversations that we've had with your local jurisdiction staff, but all of that is mainly building to an exciting presentation. We're so thrilled to have Josh Scheidler, the Interim Executive Director of Houston Transtar, to have a real world example of what dealing with O&M for a multi-agency sort of facility in the Houston area looks like, and how that kind of plays out from a benefits to the public standpoint. So I'm going to cover some of this initial, and then I'll turn it over to Josh. So with that, Stephanie, if you want to advance to the next slide. And one more. Okay, so this is just to quickly remind you guys of where we're at in the overall development process for the program. As most of you have heard numerous times, we've been working the past couple years on putting together that program level concept of operations document. And we've been methodically stepping through all of the key policy and technical issues with you all over the course of the last several years at this point. And as you might recall, while that document does a very good job of outlining the operational vision for the whole program, how all of those 6 disparate projects that Stephanie just went over, how they need to integrate and fit together from a back-end systems perspective, and even all of the policy issues that you're going to tackle in doing so, what the ConOps doesn't do is it doesn't take that and kind of prioritize the immediate steps that need to get taken, because we know we can't do everything all at once. We know that funding is not limitless. And so we need to have some sense of priorities with the interdependencies, especially since some of the projects are coming online sooner than later. And that's what that implementation plan does. And it allows for us to identify what things we need to continue to do at that bigger picture program level, such as having these conversations and figuring out some of this O&M, and what things we need to tackle at the project level. So this implementation plan is no small feat, and that's why it's very important that we're having these conversations with you all and that we're having ongoing coordination with the staff at each of your agencies. Next slide, please, Stephanie. So you guys have probably seen this ad nauseum, but I think this is our best and favorite slide for just putting into context how complicated this whole thing is. So to use Liz's words, the system of systems, with every single one of these lines connecting these subsystem boxes. So this is that back-end systems architecture, what's going on behind the scenes from an interconnectivity standpoint. And each line represents a communications or data flow. So again, no small feat, because we're dealing with a lot of existing systems shown in yellow boxes and a lot of new systems that are coming online as a part of the Innovate 680 program, because at its core, Innovate is very much a technology-driven program, and we're innovating on every level. The other thing that I'll stress here is that we are also working very hard towards making sure that we are giving some thought to all of the individual components within the orange box, the advanced technologies subsystem. And in a moment, we're going to talk about some of these subsystem components, and we spoke on them before, but I think the important piece is that O&M comes to the forefront because some of these new system components require us to think through who's going to operate this, who's going to maintain this, and how does that play out, especially in terms of sustainable and integrated operations for the whole corridor. Next slide, please. So you guys have definitely heard us cover this before, but just to reset some context, especially in light of what Josh is going to be covering. So when we talk about the way the ConOps articulates the overall vision for Innovate 680, there are some key assumptions that we are making right out the gate. And a couple of these are at the heart of that systems architecture box that we were just looking at. So that is that we have one centralized decision support system that's making decisions and coordinating between all the different subsystems. And that this system is automated and requiring little to no operator intervention. Related to that, that system is being fed by the countywide connected data center. That data center is having real-time data coming into it, and it's releasing real-time data out to the different subsystems. It essentially serves as a central data repository feeding the entire Innovate program. And it's predicated on accurate, available, reliable, real-time info. So with those two things at play, the policy issue around delegated and automated control comes to the forefront because, as I mentioned, those systems are automated. And so in order for Innovate to function, it really does require that there are these advanced algorithms that are running behind the scenes that are essentially taking what's occurring in the field in real time and making automated adjustments based on those advanced algorithms, based on the observed conditions in the field. And it's doing so in a proactive sort of manner. This does mean that there could be instances where there's a relinquishing of control from one subsystem to another, but there's a bunch of standard operating procedures and provisions that can be put in place to make sure that the system is balancing everything effectively and that the corridor is operating efficiently as a whole. And then along with that is the central assumption around an operations center. And that's really just the notion that even though a lot of this is happening behind the scenes and in that automated fashion, there is a desire to have some oversight by a staff operator that ensures that the system is working the way it's intended and that they can intervene if needed. And if necessary tweaks are required, that this operator would do so from this operations center. So these are kind of important to keep in mind when we hear what Josh is going to cover for us in a little bit. Next slide, please. So while I do want to recognize that the prior slide covers the main policy assumptions that we're going to be discussing today, I also want to just make sure that everybody knows that we are tracking all of the additional important policy issues that have arisen through the development of the ConOps and the implementation plan. The ones that are grayed out are ones that you guys have already discussed and weighed in on. The ones that are in the royal blue are those that we still have to come back and to discuss with you on. And the one down in the far bottom right that's highlighted is what we're going to be continuing to discuss today. Next slide, please. So you guys have seen this before, and I won't belabor it. It's only to just mention, as we set up for Josh to give the presentation, that when we talk about O&M considerations and where this conversation has been moving, we've been recognizing that as we think about that back-end systems architecture and all those integrated communications flows that need to occur, it kind of begs the question from a technical integration standpoint to how we should be thinking about institutional integration, and if there should be a more holistic and sustainable approach to addressing multimodal corridor operations, and that indeed it might not just be the 680 corridor that's going to be tackling this. So we started to have a conversation about the possibility of working towards a regional TMC. And while I think you guys have weighed in the past that is a favorable option, we also need to understand that that's a more long-term solution. And many of the Innovate projects are going to be coming online sooner than we would reach the development of that regional TMC. So we need to figure out what to do in the interim in a way that's cost efficient, effective, and minimizes any throwaway costs. Next slide, please. So for O&M, there's a whole bunch of O&M needs for the program, but we're going to talk today and focus more about what's shown in bold at the top, really focusing on some of those key overall program systems elements like the decision support system, the physical operations center, and what is involved when we talk about delegated and automated control. Next slide, please. You guys have seen this slide before, but I think it's always important to just understand just how fragmented our system is here in the Bay Area. And that's why the challenge that's ahead of us as we look towards some of that institutional integration to get at that technical integration is going to be a big challenge, but something that we're excited to take on as part of Innovate. Next slide, please. So this is the sustainable roadmap that you guys have seen before, but again, I think it warrants just, again, putting into context why it's so important that we start to think about the time frame when we talk overall system operations and we start having the conversation about a regional TMC or a countywide operations center or even a virtual operations center. It's important to kind of have this at play. So the far left column, as you guys know, that lists a lot of the project elements and a couple of the big program elements, the last two rows being the decision support system and the shared connected data center. The second column from left shows where there's some agency doing some sort of similar operations. It might not be exactly the same as is articulated in the vision in the Innovate 680 program ConOps, but it's something somewhat similar. And that allows us to understand and think through in the short and medium term where there might be the greatest efficiencies gleaned in terms of thinking about operations and maintenance activities. First click, Stephanie. So for the first couple of projects, the first rows, these tend to hit more on the components that are done and currently operated by our regional partners, whether that's Caltrans or MTC. So, you know, CCTA has the responsibility during thinking about how to deliver the Innovate program of talking with the regional agencies to understand how those subsystem components can be integrated from that back-end systems perspective. But they also have the responsibility of talking with a lot of the local agencies and the local transit providers. So Stephanie, if you want to give it a second click. So those remaining rows that are grouped all in blue really highlight some of those activities that are being done more at the local level right now, or in some cases, they're not being done at all. And it starts to beg the question of whether that's the right place for maybe CCTA to be stepping in to take on a larger role because they can integrate some more of those disparate operations functions and do so at the county level. Last click, Stephanie. And that doesn't preclude us from building towards a longer solution, long-term solution of a regional TMC, but it just starts to point towards a possible roadmap of how we can efficiently get there. Next slide, please. So just some basic principles that are kind of at play when we have this conversation is that regional TMC will take time to implement. And so as I was saying, in the near term, we need to maximize the use of those existing operations to the extent possible. And we want to use the systems operations components that can leverage each other. Along those same lines, we want to identify which system components could be hosted in the cloud versus those that might actually require physical space or co-location, along with the ability to have 24/7 remote access. And this is important because it might very well be the case that there's a virtual TMC occurring long before there's a bigger physical TMC. It's also important to note that where there are gaps in existing system operations, that might be, like I was saying earlier, the logical place to fill with county operations. And maybe that's where CCTA steps in and fills that void. And when we say county operations, as is indicated on the far right, I think sometimes people have a tendency to think that it's some big, huge facility. It doesn't need to be, and it certainly doesn't need to be in the short term. And maybe it doesn't need to be at all with as much as is able to be done in the cloud and virtually nowadays. But it could be a small footprint center to start. It could be 2 to 4 full-time employees in some sort of existing physical structure in the short term. And that would allow us to build towards the longer term solutions of a countywide, joint, or regional TMC, both from a physical and institutional standpoint. And all of this is to say that even with a regional TMC, there will always be an important ongoing role for county operations, especially from the Innovate 680 operational standpoint. Next slide, please. So we've been recently having a series of meetings, and when I say we, I mean Stephanie as your program manager and myself as your stakeholder engagement manager. And we've been making sure to meet one-on-one with all of the local agencies. We've met with all of the cities, we've met with the transit providers, we met with Caltrans, CHP, MTC, and FHWA to get their feedback on this whole concept of O&M, especially since we're talking about delegated and automated control and ongoing O&M, and it's going to take partnership and collaboration across the board. And maybe some people taking on roles that they don't currently have, and maybe some people relinquishing roles that they currently have. So the other thing I just want to note is that when we did this recent round of individual agency meetings, we were closing a gap in terms of meeting with the executive level staff at the agencies, so the city managers, the general managers, and the public works directors, because usually we're talking with the staff level at the TAC, or we're talking with you all as elected officials. So this was intentional to close that gap. So as you can see on the screen, there are some main themes that came from these individual meetings. And one of those is that there is a lot of support for the Innovate 680 program, but as is no surprise, these questions around O&M, they reign supreme. The devil's in the details, and everybody understands that. I think the good news is that everybody's willing to play ball for the most part from a standpoint of automated and delegated operations, but everybody does want to roll up their sleeves and dig in to the issues around standard operating procedures, liability, and make sure that that all gets hashed out on the front end. We also heard that many of the agencies that are doing existing operations, since they're not doing the operations in the enhanced way that we're envisioning for Innovate 680, that they don't have the current knowledge, skills, and abilities to tackle some of these innovative technologies. So when we talk about O&M for Innovate 680 and the enhanced O&M activities, lots of local support CCTA taking on this role and taking it on through the use of performance-based contracts with experts, because CCTA quite honestly has the trust of all of the local agencies. They're closer to home. I think a lot of the local agencies expressed concern when O&M seemed to move further away from Contra Costa County. The other thing to highlight is that everybody was in favor of taking a phased approach or doing a demo. So the same way that we're demo or piloting certain technologies like the coordinated adaptive ramp metering, they were also in favor of demoing or piloting O&M. What could that look like if we contracted it out rather than having a big agency like Caltrans or MTC handle some of that that's in the more traditional way? Funding questions reign supreme, but I think the other thing that I want to highlight for you guys is that there was appreciation across the board for the amount of ongoing collaboration and communication through meetings such as this that's going on for the program, because that institutional integration is not easy to do, and it requires at its core a lot of trust. And so this ongoing communication is helping to foster that trust, and people are therefore willing to think long-term about O&M and build towards some of those long-term solutions. And they're actually looking to the program to help support some of their own local operations because they don't have the staff, they don't have the resources, and some of them are very excited about CCTA potentially stepping in to help offload some of that responsibility. Next slide, please. So with that, I want to tee up our guest speaker for tonight. So you guys saw this slide last time, and we gave a couple of examples of some of the top regional TMCs or joint TMCs that have been deployed in the United States. And one that rose to the top is Houston Transtar. And I'm not going to steal Josh's thunder, but they have a strong benefit cost ratio. They have proven success in terms of improving operations for the public, as well as proven success in partnering with many of the disparate owners and operators in their region. So it's for those reasons that we asked Josh Scheidler from Houston Transtar to come speak with us and speak with you all today. So next slide, please, Stephanie. And one more. So with that, I'd love to bring Josh Scheidler, have him come on off of mute and take it from here. And then when Josh is done, we'll have some open discussion, and then I'll come back and put a bow on this whole conversation. So Josh, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Danielle. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes. You are good to go.
Great, great. Well, good afternoon or
So
evening.
Josh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I just have a quick question on the previous slide. So before we move forward, sorry, Candace,
Sure.
I was trying to raise my hand. I see all the involvement from the Contra Costa side, but has anybody, and MTC and so on, but has anybody reached out to ACTC?
So I'll speak to this, or Tim, did you want to cover that first?
Go for it, Danielle.
Okay, so the intent at first at the program level has been to be doing more of the base work with building those bridges in Contra Costa County, but there's a broader 680 corridor partnership that does include ACTC that has been meeting, and we've been planting these seeds. And now with some of our projects at the project level, where we are specifically looking at going into Alameda County, we are looking to engage them in a more regular way. So it was intentional that they weren't as involved to begin with, but now that we're at where we're at in the process, we're going to start seeing that more and more.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Chair Anderson, I didn't
Yes,
think I saw any other hands.
No, and I'm looking for the virtual hands, and I'm sorry, Melissa, that I did miss yours there. I'm not seeing any virtual hands up right now, and I can't see the rest of you because how we have it set up, or I have it set up, but I don't see anyone, or you can call out. Okay, now let's take it back to Josh.
Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. I'm in Houston, Texas, so it's getting to be evening here. I might have a little bit of light out my window. But my name is Josh Scheidler. I'm the interim executive director for Houston Transtar, the Southeast Texas region's transportation management and emergency management facility. While I've been at Transtar for 4 years, I've been in the director role but a few months. Our previous director decided at the end of May to hang it up and enjoy retirement. So I've been happy to step up into this role while simultaneously handling our media relations efforts and working as the facility's public information officer. But I want to thank you, Danielle and Tim and members sincerely for the invitation to present this evening about Transtar, our past, how we got here, how we operate today, and some lessons learned for our partnership over the years. If you would please advance the slide, Stephanie. So to get us started, I thought we'd first answer the question, what is a TMC? Traffic management centers serve as mission control of sorts for an urban area's major street and highway network. Next slide, please. From these centers or locations, operators monitor traffic signals, intersections, major thoroughfares, highways, proactively deploy traffic management strategies to reduce congestion, coordinate with state and local authorities during various events. But the bulk of our TMC work centers around daily stop and go traffic in the greater Houston area. We've got eyes on the roads 24/7, keying into a network of more than 1,000 CCTV cameras. And we work hard to keep our roadways as clear as can be, keep residents informed of real-time conditions, and keep lives safe. TMCs allow transportation professionals to reduce delays caused by stalled vehicles or incidents, alert approaching vehicles to problem areas, and provide information to travelers about alternate routes so that folks can make smart decisions behind the wheel, thereby reducing congestion and keeping traffic flowing. So that's generally what a TMC is, but what about Houston Transtar specifically? Next slide, please, Stephanie. I'd like to take a quick look back at our past to give you a better understanding of how we got to where we are today. In Houston, In the 1970s, our oil industry was really in its golden era. People were flocking to Texas, drawn largely by the promise of good energy jobs. But in the early 80s, the American economy was suffering through a pretty deep recession. And when oil prices started to fall, it hit Houston hard. So we lost about 200,000 plus jobs between 82 and 87. But folks knew that while every oil boom has to bust, every bust has to end at some point. And as a city, as a region, we started to climb out of the depression. And by the early 90s, we had regained most of the jobs lost. And we're looking at significant growth in the years ahead. So in the early 90s, then Mayor of Houston, Bob Lanier, who had served as a chairman to the Texas Highway Commission and also chaired the Metropolitan Transit Authority's board in Harris County, and who had spent years as a major Houston area real estate developer, started looking ahead, thinking, what is this area going to need in the coming years to ensure we can best serve residents and regional travelers? We'll need freeways that can accommodate heavy traffic, local streets that should be passable and well maintained, and also public transit that would ease demand for roadways by providing a reasonable alternative to the automobile. So based on that need, he convened the City of Houston, Harris County, the Texas Department of Transportation, the Houston District, and Metro, our transit authority, and said, why don't we work together to develop a TMC or traffic management program and center right here in town? Next slide, please. Now, early on in the discussions on this topic, partner representatives also said, you know, we here in Houston should consider one more thing. We get a lot of heavy rain events here. We get hurricanes in the Gulf, drought and dry conditions occasionally, and we've got a large petrochemical complex right down the street. Emergency management really should be something we focus on as part of this partnership or consortium. So with the two focus areas set, transportation management and emergency management, the four partner agencies entered into an initial interlocal agreement, stating that the parties would operate a facility whose purpose was to relieve congestion, minimize environmental effects of traffic, house emergency management offices for both the City of Houston and Harris County, and prepare for and respond to natural and man-made emergencies in our area. Our mission, vision, and goal statements have changed several times over the years as we've evolved and completed several strategic plans since inception. As a matter of fact, we are finalizing our most recent strategic planning effort right now. But today, what you see here is our mission, vision, and goal statements, and it's what guides our efforts every day. Next slide, please. Now, I'd like to touch a bit on our funding and budget. At the time our initial interlocal agreement was signed, the cost of building the TransStar Center was about $13 million or $13.5 million, of which $9 million was to be paid by federal funds from the Federal Highway Administration and Federal Transit Administration. The remaining $4.5 million or so was to be distributed proportionately, with the city, county, Metro, and TxDOT each paying their share. And that's largely the same approach we take today. Each partner contributes an equal amount each year to keep the facility up and running and performing at a high level. So you'll know, we secured a federal grant to help us build TransStar. We got another grant to complete a building expansion back in 2014, 2015. And then partner agencies picked up the remaining cost, but split that cost 4 ways. Next slide, please. So we ask our partner agencies to contribute about $1 million per year. That money is our yearly operating budget, the day-to-day fiscal year costs to keep the actual center running. That includes caring for maintenance of and the running of our center, a large warehouse that we have on site, and also a communications tower behind our building. You'll see that we ask about $1 million from each partner, city, county, and Metro. That number is probably a bit higher than that, and it's slightly different for each partner. We seek to keep the agency contributions equitable, but also reflective of the agency's participation within the facility. TxDOT actually owns the building and the land our building sits on. Their contribution each year is in kind. In reality, TxDOT probably over contributes a bit. I know that TxDOT's in-kind contributions include pay for certain surface transportation programs or projects and technologies, exempt salaries for 5 IT staff, and also the Transtar website contract, which we run through the Texas A&M Transportation Institute. They function as our webmasters, and TxDOT pays for that. Also, TxDOT assists with payment of some annual maintenance fees. The way that Transtar functions is one partner agency was designated by the other members as the banker, the entity that collects and accounts for revenues from all consortium partners. And the City of Houston for us is partner. So our purchasing follows City of Houston policies and protocols. Now, one big thing to mention here is that Transtar itself is not an entity. So we can't contract with vendors as Transtar. When we need things, we go to one of our partners and ask that they help us out. That doesn't allow for certain flexibility in purchasing that we might have were we instead an independent government agency or local government corporation. But that being said, it also probably affords us some flexibility too. Next slide, please. All right, so a lot goes into Transtar's budget. One of the biggest things for us was to determine originally, and I think even still today, which could certainly change a budget or funding, is what's the exact geography you're serving? What are your boundaries? I think looking back, the Transtar Consortium had to decide what partners needed to be involved for us to be successful in creating this center. What's our geography? Who are the major players in our area? Who needs to have a presence in the TMC? Our boundaries are a bit tough to define, and that should probably be noted as a lesson learned. We definitely serve the City of Houston. We also serve all of Harris County, which is home to 34 cities. The TxDOT Houston District serves 6 counties in total, and our transit partner, Metro, services certainly all of Houston, but portions of Harris County also. So these are questions you may be considering as well. What's the boundary? Is there a need for an emergency management presence? Should that element be incorporated? How do you split funding? And what about the governance side of a TMC or Joint Transportation Management and Emergency Management facility? Next slide, please, Stephanie. For Transtar, our governing body is our executive committee, which composes the chief executive officer or equivalent level executive of each party, or that person's designee from each consortium member. And in the case of TxDOT, it's the district engineer of the TxDOT Houston district. So we name a chair and vice chair each year. The chairmanship rotates in order from one member to the next each January. And our executive committee sets policy and conducts business in accordance with our interlocal agreement. They provide overall program direction with respect to all matters within the scope of that agreement. And we convene this group monthly, the first Wednesday of the month, in a meeting that I lead as Transtar's director, but we convene them. And Transtar's sort of a United Nations when all of these partners come together and work together collaboratively. Next slide, please. So while the executive committee sets policy, adopts our budget, and we have a leadership team and agency managers that really help to implement strategic planning initiatives and manage the various teams in our center. This may be a bit hard to read, but it shows the breakdown of our executive committee, the leadership team, which is oftentimes kind of the right-hand man for the executive committee member, but then also the on-site agency managers that I've mentioned. Now, we hold agency manager meetings pretty regularly, maybe not monthly, but certainly quarterly, to discuss ongoing projects in the facility, as well as even facility policies. They're in place to ensure smooth operations in our building. Sometimes things as simple as parking policies or security and access badge policies, administrative policies, those sorts of things. Next slide, please. Okay, I don't need to spend too much time on this slide, but I could always go into things a bit more in depth later if you'd like. After this meeting, Tim and Danielle, we're certainly open to having ongoing conversations and even welcoming you here to Transtar to see our space and meet with our leaders to discuss everything in more detail. But this slide shows the org chart for TransStar's director's office. Again, representatives from all 4 partner agencies make up the consortium, and also the TransStar director's office, which in a way functions as support staff for the center, for the building. Our staff work in IT, which is important for us, finance, communications and outreach, and also operations, or maintaining the facility and any facilities management efforts that are needed. Now, I should mention that's a big part of my job, facility management, keeping this place up and running efficiently, which ensures that all the great work that happens here continues uninterrupted. Next slide, please. So let's switch gears a bit and talk about the benefits of TransStar to this region here in Texas. So first and foremost, we serve the public. We have since 1993. Now, the public doesn't necessarily care who owns our facility or who operates here. They just want to get safely, quickly, efficiently from point A to point B. They want to get emergency management related information before, during, and after storms, events, disasters, and we work to make that happen. We use a shared incident management software that feeds a website and mobile application. HoustonTransStar.org is our website, and also Houston TransStar mobile app, which is a free download for iOS and Android devices. This is the fastest way for us to get information to the public, to get them real-time information about travel conditions. Now, prior to the COVID pandemic, we were seeing about 1 million unique users to our website each month. That number is down slightly today, but we're also growing the number of TransStar app downloads. I've got some work to do on that front. I've said it already, but our partnerships are what make us who we are, and they're what have made us so strong over the years. Partnerships get the credit too for a lot of the innovative technologies and programs we've developed since inception. I noted a few of the more recent programs here. First is TransStar's roadway flood warning system. I wanted to talk just briefly about this with you. During Hurricane Harvey, we were able to see flooded highways using our CCTV system on major freeways, but we didn't know which local streets were flooding. And we were actively trying to deploy emergency personnel to perform rescues and assist people at their homes or in neighborhoods. So after Harvey, we convened our partners and we put our heads together to figure out a way to use the Harris County Flood Control District's really good, really accurate rainfall sensor and stream elevation data, and overlay that information on top of our real-time traffic map to communicate with folks which areas of town are highly likely to be experiencing roadway flooding during heavy rain events. This was the TransStar director's idea initially, but partnerships really get the credit for that effort. The next program I've noted is the Tow and Go program, which is actually an MPO managed program that operates out of our TMC. The MPO here in our region is actually the Houston Galveston Area Council, and their transportation department functions as the MPO. But the Tow and Go program is a no-cost, quick clearance tow program. When drivers break down on freeways in Harris County, they can get a free tow off the freeway. This program gets drivers out of a dangerous situation on a freeway to a safe location where flat tires can be changed if necessary. If folks run out of gas, they can get towed to a nearby gas station. This program is important to me and to our partnership for several reasons. First, it helps to keep traffic moving. And we're always working to keep our traffic map green, to keep people moving. But it also reduces the number of secondary crashes and deaths from secondary crashes on our roadways. We see it far too often. Somebody gets a flat tire and pulls onto the road shoulder. And then a distracted driver comes along and veers ever so slightly out of the lane they're traveling in, and they hit a disabled car. And then we've gone from a simple flat tire situation to a fatality or multiple fatalities. So again, a partnership is in place, and this program happens the way it does because of those partnerships and because of those relationships. Another thing to mention is just how much TransStar benefits the community in terms of emergency preparedness and emergency response work. The Harris County Office of Homeland Security And emergency management occupies our entire third floor at TransStar. And we've got a large EOC, or Emergency Operations Center here, also a JIC, or Joint Information Center for Communications related efforts. As a matter of fact, the picture you see here shows our EOC when President Biden visited after Texas's awful freeze event last year. But the work that our emergency operations folks do is tops. Another thing I wanted to mention is that we measure, as part of TransStar's annual report, operational benefits in terms of freeway motorist delay savings. The Texas A&M Transportation Institute helps us to look at and measure reductions in fuel consumed or gallons of fuel saved thanks to TransStar services, along with how many fewer vehicle hours people spend on the road thanks to TransStar services, which results in emission reduction in carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and nitrogen oxide. Now, I can get you all numbers on that if you'd like. Tim, I'd be happy to pass those along to you, as well as introduce you to the folks from our area and team who can speak more eloquently than I on the exact process behind those measurements. But it's an important one to mention too. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So just a couple of fun pictures here. I want to make sure I express that TransStar has become a symbol for safety, dependability, and progress in the region. When people see a press conference taking place at TransStar, they know it's important, and we've built that trust over time. Sort of sidebar, but during COVID, we held the majority of the press conferences about COVID updates from our first floor lobby. We hosted 150 plus press conferences in the first year and a half after the pandemic started. So we were working a lot. But our pivotal transportation role in the region has saved motorists a lot of money and reduced travel costs over the years. And on the emergency management front, TransStar's partners have long promoted a culture of preparedness, educating people about essential disaster readiness and response activities. Next slide, please. So this slide simply shows a few neat pictures of what our CCTV cameras have spotted during heavy rain events, and also our roadway flood warning tool in action. But for 26 years, the people at TransStar have successfully built an advanced and innovative transportation network. The work our teams do together to keep roadways clear, residents informed, and life safe is really second to none. Next slide, please. So this is my final slide. I wanted to tie in some lessons learned over the years. Now, I haven't been around long enough to personally tell you about some of the hard lessons learned, but we've got folks on staff who certainly have been. And again, I would love to welcome you or a group of you guys to TransStar to have those sorts of conversations with folks. We can organize follow-up chats and Teams meetings moving forward. We'd love to have you though. But I would suggest a couple of things. I mentioned it before, but defining the specific region is an important thing. And people ask me a lot about this, and I don't have a great answer. The response kind of depends on the program we're talking about. Do we service the greater Houston region? Or is it the 8-county MPO region? Or is it TxDOT's 6-county region? Or is it all of Southeast Texas? Because we also provide service to travelers who are simply passing through. So it's a good question. Lately I've been saying the Southeast Texas region. Another important thing to determine is how to measure success. I think this is something that should be revisited often. Is it enough to look at reductions in fuel consumed and emissions reductions? Are we reducing the number of incidents on roadways because of the work we do? Are we reducing the number of secondary crashes on roadways? Are we clearing broken down vehicles or crashes from roadways in a timely enough manner, thereby reducing the number of times distracted drivers hit stalled or disabled vehicles? Are our digital roadway signs or DMS signs effective enough? And are we programming those as efficiently as possible? Are we doing enough public outreach? Really, there's a lot to consider here. When it comes to performance measurement, I know that many of our partners check in with their own specific teams about performance. A lot of this happens in silos, I think, because of how different the projects and programs are at Transtar. So for example, the Harris County Emergency Management Team largely does their own thing on that front. And they submit to me information for our annual report about their efforts and successes throughout the year. On the transportation side of things and our incident management programs, specifically, for example, those are a bit more united. And we review as a large group of multi-agency partners how things are going year over year to see how successful our efforts have been and where there are opportunities for improvement. Another thing for Transtar is that relationships with media partners is big. We're the traffic management center, and the media relies on us for real-time information. And we rely on them to communicate updates with the traveling public. That took us a while to really understand how big, how important those relationships are, and to build up those partnerships. But now, today, every time someone watches the morning or the evening news and they see a traffic report, reporters show Transtar roadway cameras. They key into those just like we do. And folks at home see our logo and our equipment in action. And reporters mention our name and credit Transtar for the work that we're doing at RTMC. I mentioned earlier about Transtar not being an entity. That can be challenging when we want to contract with a vendor for a certain service. We have to have one of our partners do it for us, or when we want to apply for a grant. Transtar can apply for a grant, but one of our partners can sponsor a grant application and submit on our behalf. However, the partners are also looking for grants themselves and applying for funds for other city-specific projects or other county-specific projects. So that can, at times, be a bit challenging, but it takes active communication between partners, which we certainly have. Something else to consider is purchasing for minor things at our facility and also hiring of personnel to support the building. For us, we've set up the Transtar Director's Office, support staff really, and most are city folks who help with these sorts of things. But these are things simple as supplies purchases in the building. And keep our spaces in good condition. We maintain a state of good repair information to assist with that. Something else to look at, considering how equipment is shared. That's important for sure. And this one can be a bit tricky. For us, there have been several occasions where a partner will look at this place as their facility. And that's not exactly how it works. This is not just a county building or a city building. This is not a TxDOT specific facility. So TxDOT in Austin, the state, can't come to Transtar and change things the way that they can in other TxDOT districts because our technologies and resources are truly shared. So if TxDOT is trying to make a statewide change, there are a number of conversations that must first be had in Houston. And if something is going to change at Transtar, that has to go through our executive committee for approval. And you know what? I think I'll close with the final bullet here, and that's how to keep innovation top of mind. Houston Transtar works because it was a good idea years ago, and our partners continue to invest in this place. Our executive committee recognizes the value of innovation and understands that cooperative efforts through the Transtar partnership can foster innovative thinking and innovative ideas. I mentioned earlier that we are finalizing a strategic planning process or update right now. In our draft plan, we note the importance of setting up an innovation development technical work group that can look at single and multiple agency activities and initiatives and make recommendations to our leadership team and our executive committee for coordinated innovation projects. So we do work hard to keep thinking ahead and planning for what's next for Transtar. We haven't presented our plan to the executive committee yet, but I know some of the things that we'd like to look at and our experts would like to be looking at is connected infrastructure, connected vehicle and automated vehicle support, traffic signal coordination for incident management, construction closure information system improvements, and maybe even some strategic planning for TransStar website enhancements. It's been a while since we've had a facelift and an enhancement to our website. It's probably time that we did that. Next slide, please. I think I've got one last slide. Yeah, so with that, I have talked at you guys enough. You've been kind to listen. I mentioned this before, but I'd love to welcome you to TransStar. And I'd also be happy to set up follow-up conversations about specific topics, looping in subject matter experts where needed. But for tonight, I say thank you again sincerely for the invitation to participate. Thank you for thinking of TransStar.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Josh. And if we can go ahead and turn off the screen share just so we can see one another a little bit better. Committee members, have you any questions for Josh? A lot of great information. Go ahead, Sue, please.
Two questions. I saw that county and Houston, the city, were partners. What about smaller cities surrounding Houston? How do they play into that organization, contribute, interact with them? And then the second piece is I didn't hear anything about sort of transit agencies and how you interact with them and how that coordination goes.
Sure. So our partnership is City of Houston, Harris County, TxDOT, and Metro. But really, we service the whole area. So we do often communicate with the smaller cities as well. And the real-time transportation data and traffic data we're pushing certainly encompasses those areas. So as far as the information we're pushing to the traveling public, people in Galveston are getting information up in the Woodlands. We've got CCTV cameras all the way up to Dallas, west near to San Antonio. So a large proportion of the traveling public in smaller cities and large cities have access to our data. And we communicate with smaller cities pretty regularly. On the emergency management side of things, they are certainly involved in calls as we're responding to certain events. And it kind of depends on what event we're responding to, but we'll loop in smaller cities, invite them to our Joint Information Center and our Emergency Operations Center to respond to various events as they arise. And then as far as our transit authority goes, so the Metropolitan Transit Authority of Harris County, Metro, is our transit provider. Their presence at TransStar is really what makes us a multimodal facility. They have several different operational units conducting their work at TransStar. It's bus operations, HOV, HOT lane operations, Metro Rail operations, and then also Metro Police has staff at our facility as well. So they are all in our transportation control room, talking with bus operators, rail operators. Metro Police is dispatching law enforcement to clear incidents and crashes and address certain things that are happening in Metro's network. But Metro is actually, Tom Lambert, he's the president and CEO of Metro. He's been one of our biggest advocates since the beginning, and he is proud to have his operations in our TMC.
Okay, any follow-up? Did that answer your question, Sue?
Yeah, it's you know, a lot of that was emergency related, but the second part was super interesting. So I appreciate that. Thank you for the answer.
And
Sure,
with us, with only 19 cities in Contra Costa, it's just you
know, that's where I'm trying to draw some correlations there somehow.
You know, it's a little bit of a different animal, but glad to see everyone working cooperatively. Deb, please go ahead. Deborah Allen.
Well, thank you. And Josh, thank you for joining us tonight. It was all very interesting. Just a couple of questions. One is, and I think I may have gotten a sense from the last conversation, how does the area that you serve, Josh, I think you said 4 counties, but then on one slide I saw like a connection to 8 counties. How does that geographic area compare to like the size of Contra Costa County? I have to admit, I've only flown in and out of Houston once, so not real
Sure.
familiar.
Yeah, sure. So the boundaries are tough for us. The city of Houston is a partner, and so we certainly operate in the city. Harris County is a partner, and so we operate in incorporated and unincorporated Harris County. Harris County includes 34 cities, but the TxDOT Houston district is actually 6 counties. So that's probably a more realistic boundary for us. The Houston Galveston Area Council, NPO, their transportation department services 8 counties. So it's TxDOT 6 counties plus 2 additional to the east.
But what's that geographic area? I mean, how does that compare to Contra Costa? Maybe Tim can answer that better.
As far as, Tim, please feel welcome to weigh in. As far as people, residents, we've got 7+ million people in our region, more than 5 million registered vehicles in our service area alone, which is TxDOT 6 county region. But Tim, please feel welcome to jump in.
They're almost 7 times larger than Contra Costa.
Okay. That's really what I was looking for. Okay, and then I think these are really questions for our CCTA people. So I don't know if you want me to ask those now or wait until after people are done with Josh.
No, because this is all sort of a combined presentation. So go ahead, throw those out there, see if we can get those answered. And
okay, so I'm very intrigued by the collaboration at TransStar with the Office of Emergency Services, and I'm just wondering if maybe the 2 supervisors here could comment on, Josh really got me thinking about how all that connects. And then I started going, but what do we do now? Are we trying to fix something that's already kind of working?
Well, CHP does most of our freeway roads emergency response. So right there, they're already sitting at the table. So we definitely have CHP partnering, looking at this. Each of us have our own police departments. And of course, Sheriff's Department, we have an amazing emergency operations center. And I think particularly, I love the fact that Josh brought up for natural disasters. They've got flooding, we've got earthquakes. And so at that point, you would absolutely be having that interaction, but all of unincorporated roads, really it's CHP that does traffic enforcement. But then you do have our fire districts that do the emergency response as well. So primarily, Con Fire in central, San Ramon Valley in the south. And then if you're heading down toward Orinda, which isn't on 680 corridor, but then you would have MOFD. So I think you've got some great partners from an emergency operations center standpoint. And I think everyone has their own EOC, but I like that concept of you're able to step in when you need to at the appropriate emergency. Karen, do you have something you want to add here in Mitchoff?
I see Chris Sherry from the CHP is on the line, is on our Zoom.
Yeah.
And so I'm sort of calling you out, Captain. I think you're Captain by your bars. Are you there?
Yes, I am here. I'm the commander of the Dublin area with the 680 corridor. And also on this call is our division chief, Chris Costigan, who oversees the 9 Bay Area counties. So whatever level you want to send the question to, we're here for you.
Yeah, I think that really my question is, in looking at what we're attempting to do with this new program, what are the benefits and the improvements in the communication between OES and transportation and CHP and so on? Is our new center and fantastic operations and new concept, is that going to sort of lay over the top of all these other agencies who are currently handling all of these issues now? And does our agency help bring all of those together? I'd love to hear what CHP thinks on that. Does this help?
And Tim too. Let's have CHP. You go first, and then Tim, if you want to comment as well, since you're sort of have been bringing all these parties together.
Yeah.
So does the other Chris want to speak about this? I don't know if he's available.
I'm guessing it's the 542 number.
Oh, if you're the 542, if you're on the phone, please go ahead. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, hi, Chris Costigan out of Golden Gate Division. Yeah, no, I'm excited about a regional TMC. Obviously, we use our collaborative TMC out of Oakland, which covers the freeway infrastructure through the 9 Bay Area counties. but having the ability at a county level, and I know Tim Hale and I have had several conversations about this, at a county level to include everybody in the management of that traffic, especially during emergency incidents, where we can then obviously look at different avenues and how that's going to affect it, even through incident caused traffic congestion, where we can use that adaptive ramp metering to control that and work with the different agencies up and down the corridor is going to be important to us. So we see the value in it. Obviously, it may be a little bit down the road as far as getting everybody to buy off on it, but if that ever gets up and running, we would definitely be interested and be involved in that regional TMC.
So these are things we don't currently have. So that's what I was really looking for. We're moving forward to putting some things in place that we should have that maybe others have. And then the last question I have, and it might be premature for this, but I was intrigued by Josh's conversation about how do you measure success? And so I guess this is probably kind of a question for Tim. In this process so far, have we talked about how we would measure the success of the program, or are we not really at the level of that detail yet?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. And I think as we started out with our goals, we do have, performance metrics to be able to measure ourselves around those goals. And that's one of the key things about the program in terms of, collecting data from all of the different aspects of the transportation system, is to be able to monitor and better understand system performance, so we can understand how we're actually measuring success. Because the last thing I want to do is, invest $1 billion into this corridor and we can't decide if we actually were successful. So
exactly.
So I think it's important to, have those baseline metrics and then be able to measure over time. And that's something that, we don't necessarily do on a regular basis. We typically, throughout the Bay Area and through transportation, quite honestly, we typically deliver a project and we just walk away, right? And so this is really a time where we want to be more performance-based. We want to use and learn what we're actually implementing, and then make tweaks along the way, as we're developing this overall system. And so those keys to success are really up to this group. What are the metrics that we want to measure ourselves by? And that was really part of some of the early discussions that we had at the Policy Advisory Committee about goals and metrics. And as we kind of move down this path of implementation of the ConOps, we'll be revisiting those things as we have those discussions. And, as we kind of go through, Danielle listed a lot of those different boxes and policies. Within each of those policies, there's going to be metrics of how we're going to measure ourselves in some actions. And so that'll be part of, future plans and future reports. So
I look forward to that.
Okay, so
and this is Danielle. Could I add one more thing just on top of that?
Yes, you may.
Okay, Member Allen, I also wanted to make mention that a lot of these subsystems that are coming online for Innovate 680 are in and of themselves going to be producing data that'll come back and get fed through the countywide connected data center, which will enhance our future availability to even dive more deeply into some of those metrics and at a more granular level. So as Tim said, we are going to start with some baseline metrics with what we've got today. But if we deploy the system the way it's envisioned, we're going to take leaps and bounds and strides in having additional metrics that'll help us get to those specific measures of success that you're looking for.
Thank you.
Okay, great. I do see Chris Costigan's hand still up, and I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to add, Chris. Not hearing or seeing anything. Let's go on to Karen Stepper then.
All right. Thank you very much. I think the reason we're hearing so much about emergencies and in the questions here, and that's what mine is about, is because anytime there's an accident on the freeway and if we don't get a quick tow and go or whatever's going to happen, it's a quagmire through Danville and all of your cities, because I've been there. You're trying to get out of Walnut Creek. It's impossible when there's an accident that's a bad one. So I'm since I don't know if Josh knows, that we have the Abrixa system where we're at least coordinating how all the responders can hear each other and speak to each other. Does this system TransStar actually go out to the individual vehicles and the different technology that our police have, or is this something that's going right down to the TransStar state center and then being used some other way?
So Karen, I'm not familiar with the Abrixa system. I'll look into that. If I can provide you a good answer, I'll follow up with you. As far as our law enforcement personnel in the traffic management center, we've got the Harris County Sheriff's Office. We've also got Metro Police, and they work hand in hand with TxDOT, with the city, with the county. When there are problem areas on roadways, we can tell because vehicle speeds start to slow down in certain areas. We can key into the camera system and see what is happening on the roads, and then we can dispatch the appropriate personnel to respond to the various events. So they are in the room looking at the same equipment and kind of seeing what our transportation specific folks are looking at. But the law enforcement individuals are kind of in a room locked behind a glass door in our control room, kind of by themselves, utilizing some of their own equipment as well. So I'm not certain I'm answering your question appropriately.
Yeah, you're very close. I think I heard you kind of hint on the edge and not quite there. They're not really sending things to them of your data like you do for the news and the weather and your TransStars on screen.
Right.
You're seeing what they're doing. They're seeing what you're doing. It's a little bit different from the coordination I was looking for. So.
Okay.
Thank you. And maybe Tim can talk about sometime to me with that question, because it's a little complicated for me as well. So thank you.
And Karen, I'll look into that a little bit too. If I can follow up with Tim with anything additional, I'll certainly do that.
Well, and I think, and just to give you a little more context, our Abrixa system essentially allows us in the East Bay to have all of our law enforcement first responders speak on the same radio way. And so it's just everyone has a radio that speaks to another radio. So you're not siloed by agency. When there's an emergency, you're all able to speak on the same bandwidth. So I think Karen may be asking, do you have, through your dispatch capacity, do you send things right out to the officer who's on the freeway or the one who's patrolling the street? Or does that get coordinated through your law enforcement or first responders that are glassed off, and then they send it through their regular dispatch system as opposed to you sending out information through your dispatch?
Yeah. Okay. So I get the question.
Yeah,
so it sort of depends on the incident that they're responding to. Sometimes TxDOT will see it and they will stand up and talk to the workstation 3 rows down or three seats down, which is the Harris County Sheriff's Office, and say, hey, we've got a jackknife 18-wheeler at this section of the roadway. It's a hazmat spill. We're going to need hazmat operations out there. We're going to need Harris County Sheriff's Office for traffic cushion. And then each agency can get the appropriate personnel to that space. As far as sharing radio frequency, I'm not certain about that, but I know that everything sort of starts in our control room, and then the folks will call the resources that they need to get to that site and ensure a quick response.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Karen? Did that?
No, thank you for rephrasing it. So
no, I just, you lived and breathed the Abrixa from the beginning, and not everyone knows what it is. So Mark, if you want to go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Josh, for your presentation. Appreciated it, and we'll take you up on your offer. If we come down there, you can have us all go to NINFA's on the one on the canal, the original one.
The original on navigation, absolutely.
Yeah. But unfortunately, I don't know who'd pay for it because you can't do your own invoicing. You'd have to get one of them.
I'll foot the bill for that one. I'd love to have you guys come.
Okay, we'll have the shrimp. I'll order the shrimp. But anyway,
there you go.
So I guess the two-part question about integration. One is setting up the authority the integration between all the parties. I don't know how people connect in or feel about their provincial titles and their little kingdoms and fiefdoms down in Houston, but here we're pretty open, but we have our moments. Number one, how tough was it to get everybody herded into one corral? And two, how hard is it to keep them in the same corral and on the same page? Is there a trick to it, or is there just ongoing, or is that not a problem?
No, that's a great question. I know that our open communication is paramount, is absolutely key, and keeping these folks involved always is key. So we have monthly meetings with our executive committee members to keep them apprised of kind of what's going on. And as I said, they set policy and set our direction. We've got their right-hand people who meet at Transtar every other week. So we're constantly in communication with them. And then everybody's invested. Each agency has their own agency managers assigned to the Transtar facility to oversee certain projects. So they've got a vested interest in Transtar and want to continue to see it be successful. I think getting the partners all together originally, I don't know exactly what that looked like. I'm sure there was a little bit of hesitation and a little bit of doubt and hey, what is this, and is this going to work, and how does this benefit me exactly? But then Mayor Bob Lanier was a relationship builder, was really able to communicate, hey, here's the benefit, here are the types of things that we're going to be able to see if we work collaboratively. And oftentimes we'll be able to enter into new and exciting projects at a quarter of what it would cost each of us to do independently. And I think that was enticing, certainly. So, keeping our partners engaged is my job and the job of the Transtar Director's Office. Keeping folks involved, keeping opportunities top of mind where we can potentially collaborate and share data and information and resources is always something that I'm looking to do. And so it's a job that doesn't stop. I'm always trying to think of how can I combine these partners' efforts. And to date, everyone has been responsive and excited to continue their cooperation and participation in Transtar.
So thank you, Ganesh. So it's been driven by the leader, Bob Lanier. It took leadership to get everybody to convey the benefits. Okay.
It did, Mark. And I will say we've had certain executive committee members over the years who have not been as involved in Transtar. We've had a Harris County judge who was extremely involved, and then we had one who less so. She assigned that responsibility, the executive committee chair, to someone else on her team. You kind of get what you put into it. When we have active participation from all of the executive committee members, we've really been able to accomplish a lot together.
The second part of the question is integration of data. I mean, out here we have literally 8-track tapes, we got cassette recorders, and we got disc players, all trying to, in the Bay Area transportation universe, that are running these systems, and we have to try to integrate all those. Did you guys have that same? If you guys had that same problem, how is the data integrated, and what was the biggest challenge in overcoming that?
Mark, I'm not going to have a great way to articulate the answer for that. I know that we've got IT staff from TxDOT, from Metro, from the city, and from the county who work in our data center, and they are responsible for most of that and ensuring that it all works, and that we're able to collect data and push data and information out, especially to our stakeholder network, the traveling public, and get information out to the folks who need it. I know that it's complicated, and I've got folks on my team who could certainly articulate and speak to your question.
I guess what I'm looking
for. Go ahead.
Just to make it quicker, so what I'm looking for, I guess, is did you have problems? Did it come up, and did it cause ripples in the pond? That any system's going to have some growing pains.
Yeah, I think it has. But again, everybody's got a seat at the table, right? Not just the executive committee, but we've got the agency managers on site at Transtar and all of their staff. So the city may be using some different technology than the county, and TxDOT may be using something different, but they're constantly in communication to ensure those sorts of technologies can work together, and everything is able to kind of to benefit the partnership.
Okay, so any problems? It hasn't caused any big rifts, or
it hasn't. We've been able to continue doing what we do.
Okay, well, thank you, Josh. And by the way, just because the Astros are 28 games ahead of our Oakland Athletics, don't get too comfy. We have you right where we want you.
Yeah, you guys, y'all are the sports. You get all the praise right now. You guys have some stellar teams. So
yeah, we're lucky. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Carlin, let's go back to you.
Thank you. So I thought I heard you say, Josh, that each of the agencies puts in about $1 million annually. Did I understand that correctly?
That's correct.
And so, great. And so, so thinking about setting up a new system, first there's the upfront cost, and then there's the sustainability. So is there some kind of bond measure? Is there a sales tax measure? Is it just, what is the, how do you keep the dollars flowing year after year? Is there some kind of contract? How is, and how long is that, is that into perpetuity? What does the financing look like to keep this going long term?
Sure. So we've got our interlocal agreement, Carlin, and that is a 10-year interlocal agreement. And it says that the city, county, TxDOT, and Metro will continue to be involved in this partnership for that duration, and it will renew, or with the option of renewing at the end of that 10-year period. And it's up to the TransStar director to manage the budget and to say every year, here's, based on the number of computers that we have in the facility and the number of phones and the space that you occupy in the building, here's what's being asked of each partner agency to contribute to the budget to ensure that our center stays afloat and continues to perform at a high level. So it's as simple as us getting with our executive committee every December, actually every November, and saying, here's the ask every year. Here's what we need to ensure that the center can continue to support your operation at TransStar. And that comes out to about 1.2 million or so from each partner agency. Now, the annualized cost estimate of TransStar is, Texas A&M Transportation Institute has measured that at about 25 million, which is a figure that gets calculated by, like I said, the Texas A&M Transportation Institute, but it takes into account each partner agency paying their staff salaries, the staff who work at TransStar, their medical benefits, retirement plans, things like that. Each partner agency hires their own staff and then positions certain people here at TransStar based on need and their job responsibilities. We probably have 250 people who check in, badge into our facility every single day. So it's a large number of people. But as far as what we ask when we go to get budget approval, it comes in right at about $1 million.
Okay, thank you. And have you gone through a renewal period? So are you still in the first 10 years or because I'm just curious, over time as leadership changes, it sounds like you're providing a lot of value to the agencies that are helping to finance this. But I mean, how many times have you been renewed if you have, or do you anticipate there ever being any issues with agencies wanting to continue with you over time?
That's a great question. I'm not certain how many we've done. I think at the beginning, it was every year. They would revisit it every year. I'm not certain how many times that happened. The last 2 interlocal agreements were 10 years each. So I think we signed our last interlocal agreement in 2018. So this will take us through 2028. And yes, at that point, if a partner decided that they wanted to pull out, they could. But we do work to prove that value every step of the way.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Carlin. Okay, Liz Ames from BART.
Oh, thank you. I didn't know you could see my name there. Okay. Yes. So I'm really excited about this project. I love this project. Okay. So I would love to see buses go to the shoulder when there's congestion. And I wanted to compare this system to like what San Diego's been doing. So I talked to the director of Caltrans in District 11, San Diego, and they've been doing bus on shoulder. And so they put devices in the bus to trigger the metering lights, so they don't have to stop at when they get on the freeway, the buses. Then if there's an accident and I'd love to hear from the CHP, but the CHP is contacted. Wait, let me think about this. The bus is notified by the CHP, I guess, if there's an accident and then they're in the shoulder. So this is really like the low tech solution where it's not, maybe it's more direct connection, communication system where the bus operator is talking to the CHP person in this incident on the shoulder. And then the bus then is notified and the bus goes into the travel lane away from the accident. So how does that kind of low technology relate to this technology that, you're doing this in Houston or in Texas, if that makes sense?
Well, so Liz, I hope I can answer your question. So what happens with our Metro's bus operation at Transtar is we've got folks on our control room floor who are in the ear and able to communicate with all of the buses that are in operation at any given moment. And during peak times, we've got as many as 1,200 buses who are dispatched. Now, if there's a crash on a local street, they can call to that bus operator or radio to that bus operator and say, hey, you've got something coming up. It's a real trouble spot. We're going to reroute your route to ensure that you can stay on time. If it's freeway operation, it would be the same thing. Hey, we're gonna have you go this direction instead of this direction to ensure that you can stay on time.
Okay, so you're not so that CHP person is not talking to the bus driver directly.
They will radio into the bus driver directly. Yeah, they can do that.
They will.
Yes.
They can still do that, but your operation is more, it seems like it's really more coordinated with so many different options. You can tell them to reroute somewhere if necessary.
Indeed.
Okay.
Yes, so they can. Yeah, they can from our TMC or from our control room floor can radio to any specific bus operator to communicate updates or certain information that they'd like to communicate to that route.
Okay, wow, it's really an evolved system. Thank you. That's a great system you have. Thank you.
And Tim, do you want to comment a little, because we've really explored and developed bus on shoulder for our county. We don't quite have it up and running yet, but it's part of our, obviously, Innovation 680. How would that coordinate with our future center, assuming we get one?
So the project that Director Ames was referring to is the 805 project, and the way that project works is it uses wireless communication to preempt the ramp meter signals to basically to allow buses to travel safely through the on-ramps. So for example, if the on-ramp is traveling, it'll communicate, hold the on-ramp a red light longer, so that way the bus can travel through the on-ramp in a safe way. So that's very similar, technology that we would apply to the 680 bus on shoulder project that we're developing between Bishop Ranch and San Ramon, Bollinger Canyon Road, all the way to Walnut Creek BART. But I think, these types of technologies is really important because safety is the #1 priority when you have bus on shoulder operations. Maintaining safe operations in the shoulder and, respecting the fact that the shoulder is part of CHP's office space, and also making sure that, we're managing incidents and having good communication between our transit operators and California Highway Patrol, as well as dispatch, for emergency services as well, when we do have potential incidences in the shoulder. And we're also going to be looking at other technologies for the buses. We're going to be looking at, forward warning collision systems, lane keeping technologies, blind spot technologies, and making sure that we, can provide the technologies in the buses to help maintain safety of the shoulder. And so So I think those are some of the concepts that we're looking at as part of the development of our project. And just to be really clear, you know, the bus on shoulder project, in terms of how it will operate, buses will only be authorized in the shoulder when the traveling lanes are less than 35 miles an hour. And so this is not a fast operation. This is something, you know, in more of a slow moving operation, although, you know, 25, 35 miles an hour, it's, you know, can be considered, you know, quick. But in terms of those operations, you know, the bus similar to 805 and, you know, similar to some of the other bus on the shoulder operations in the corridor, it's going to be important to be able to communicate, you know, well, number one, identify an incident in the shoulder. So using video analytics and using this more regional, you know, TMC operations center, being able to coordinate with Caltrans's TMC, coordinate with our TMC to make sure we're identifying incidents in the shoulder, identifying when CHP is using the shoulder, and making sure we're dispatching that in real time to the operators so they know it's coming ahead of them. So that way they can, as Director Ames mentioned, the bus would simply just move into the travel lane, you know, in advance of that particular location and then move back into the shoulder. So that communication is really key, and I think this RTMC really demonstrates how we can orchestrate that communication for safe travel in the shoulder.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I just thought you might want to elaborate. Okay, Karen Mitchoff, thank you for your patience.
Well, actually, I'm bringing up, it looks like the tail end. And first of all, thank you so much for that presentation. Absolutely fabulous and exciting. I just want to point out to my colleagues, and I believe Supervisor Anderson knows this, and this is just to end the discussion on a little bit of levity. I heard Josh mention that you had a judge who sat on, I guess, your governing board or something. In Texas, everybody, if you didn't know, supervisors are called judges. And therefore, Candace and I in the future should be referred to as your owner.
Okay, thank you for that important comment, Your Honor. And are there any more comments or questions for our great presentation that we had? Josh, we really appreciate you jumping in onto California time for us this evening. And it sounds like some of us might enjoy a trip to Houston to see in real time what this looks like. So it looks like, Tim, you've got some other comments, so please go ahead.
Well, I wanted to maybe frame a vision maybe for this group that we can, you know, continue to explore, because I think, you know, Chief Chris Costigan kind of mentioned earlier that we've been chatting about, you know, what the future might hold, you know, for some sort of, you know, potential county operations facility. And so, you know, so CCTA is working really closely with Contra Costa County, with Supervisor Anderson, Supervisor Mitchoff, you know, and all the supervisors on the work that CCTA is doing at Gomentum Station. And so the county has identified a first responder emergency training facility on the north part of Gomentum Station. And so something that CCTA is going to be working on, you know, with the county is, you know, working with the county sheriff, working with the fire department, working with the airports division. That's also an element of Contra Costa County. Also working with California Highway Patrol, and through a strategic plan, you know, really potentially identifying where this potential, you know, what this potential first responder training facility would look like. And there could be a potential, and I may be getting out ahead of myself a little bit here, but there could be a potential to bring in this operations facility, you know, within that training facility. And so that would be a really good location, since we already are already talking with airport, fire, sheriff, and CHP. And so that's the type of kind of vision that, you know, that we're thinking, and whether it's there or in a different location, but it's something that we're thinking about, and thinking how we can move this vision forward, you know, through some sort of strategic plan with these different entities in the county. So, and it goes hand in hand, you know, with this overall discussion. So,
Great. Thank you for tying that all together. And we're all looking forward to the potential co-location of something like that if we move forward. Okay, any other comments on this topic? Anyone from the public? Terry Ann, do we have any written comments from anybody ahead of time on this topic?
No
Okay.
written public comments.
Okay, and I'm not seeing any virtual hands from our multitude of attendees, and we appreciate so many people being here this evening. So we're now going to move on to our next item, and this is going to be correspondence. In your packet, you've got the Innovate 680 issue 6 newsletter for spring and summer, and the concept of operations executive summary. And I'm going to see if anyone wants to comment on that. Danielle, let's have you talk a little bit about this as well.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Anderson. I did have 1 or 2 more closing slides just to put a bow on that last conversation. No, it's okay. But I do just want to give everybody a sense of where we go next really quickly, if you don't mind, and then I can definitely speak to what you just said.
Please. Okay. Yes. You just keep rolling. You got it.
Okay. No problem. This will take 2 minutes or less. So we are going to continue this conversation with you guys around O&M. Obviously, you can see there's a lot here. We are so happy to continue to dive more deeply into your specific questions, answers, and so you can expect this O&M conversation to come back to you in addition to some of the other policy issues that you see highlighted in blue. Next slide, please, Stephanie. And from a stakeholder engagement implementation plan development viewpoint, as you can see, we're working towards wrapping up the implementation plan, probably in the early fall, definitely by the end of this calendar year. We will continue to meet with you all quarterly, and we're going to continue to work through the nuts and bolts of some of this with the TACCON Ops working group. So we'll be talking more about the details of the implementation plan, which is tackling this O&M issue. It's tackling how do we measure success. It's tackling a variety of issues, like I said, that were outlined in the CONOPS. So rest assured that your staff are also well aware of this. And then we're also going to continue to make sure that we're keeping our executives in the loop. So we have the first meeting of the Executive Steering Committee actually coming up next week, and that's the Caltrans District 4 Director, the Director of Operations at MTC, and Tim as your Executive Director for CCTA. And that's really going to afford us the opportunity to have more of this conversation with some of the other big regional agencies that have some very real skin in the game in terms of current operations and what this partnership could look like going forward. And then last but not least, as you guys know, Tim is making the rounds with the city councils to just close some gaps to make sure that all of the rest of the council members are apprised of what we're doing here for Innovate, although I think those briefings also are a variety of other topics relevant to CCTA. So with that is the last sort of wrap up. So if there's any additional questions on the next steps, I'd be happy to field those. Otherwise, Chair Anderson, we can also ask if there's any additional PAC feedback or topics that folks would like for the next meeting.
Okay, and I am not seeing any hands up. And if I'm not seeing you, you can wave at me, you can shout out. I'm not seeing that either. So I believe that people are good with that. No topics of discussion that anyone wants to see us take a deeper dive on that have been presented this evening. If something does come up, we just meet quarterly, and you can certainly reach out to Tim and let him know, or Terry Ann, and let her know that there's a topic that you've thought of, or after presentation to your city council that you want to delve a little bit deeper into. I am not seeing any, so I do believe that our next meeting is not until October 12th, 2022. I mean, that's way out there. So plan on that, put that on your calendar. And if there are no additional comments, we are going to adjourn our meeting at 7:50 p.m. And thank you for spending the last hour and 50 minutes with us. Thank you all. Good night.
Yeah, good night.